It's the third day of May 2022. We are at the Plattsburgh House of Prayer. That's the official title of this facility here.
Yes.
And we're here for the Clinton County Historical Association presentation, which will be presented by this young lady. Your name?
Julie Dowd.
And what's your title with the Clinton County Historical Association?
Oh.
Do you have one?
Yes, I do. It's pretty fancy.
Probably have two or three.
Yeah. My title is Board Member Emeritus because I'm no longer on the board.
Oh.
I gave it up. I also do the Facebook pages for the association.
So you said if I'm going to keep doing those Facebook pages, you better give me a title, right?
I guess so.
Okay, so you are the Civil War expert. Is that the idea?
Well, I'm the person that does the Civil War stories on the soldiers. I don't know about expert.
Okay, and you do these how often on the Facebook page?
I try to do one a day.
Every day?
Yeah.
You're going to run out of soldiers sooner or later?
No,
Like
no.
365
I'm going to
a
run out
year?
of my life. Since 2015, when we started, we've put on 2,280, and there's over 5,000. So I'd better live 5 more years.
And these are all from Clinton County?
Yeah, all who enlisted in Clinton County.
Okay, so you had other
Yeah.
people coming up
Mhm,
from other areas, but enlisted here. Okay. So tonight's presentation, what are we going to talk about?
Well, we're going to talk about how to find those ancestors, and we're also going to have a presentation by Jacob Woodward about his great-great-great-grandfather, Peter DeBray. Yeah.
You got enough greats in there, you sure?
Well, 3 of them. 3 of them's enough, yeah, I think.
So I have to use my fingers when I start talking about my ancestors,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
many greats I go back.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the first event of the year, I think, isn't it?
Yes,
You
it
guys?
is. First event of the year, and next week we open the museum for the first time in 2 years to the public, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the third, so the day of the opening is?
It is. Let me just check my card here.
There you go. She wrote this card. So
Yeah.
She knows.
May 4th.
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow it is. My gosh, I'm ahead of myself here. Yeah.
You better show up tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I don't go in there anymore.
Oh, you don't go
But
there
no.
anymore?
And then we've got something coming up on the 17th, which is a lady talking about the Haudenosaunee turtle sculpture down by the harbor.
That's Native American.
Yeah. And then May 28th, Helen's giving tours of the Oval. Starting again because she gives them all summer long.
Okay, that's a former Plattsburgh Air Force Base Oval.
Right. And then on June 7th, we've got Bob St. John doing his frog farm talk. And
I've been to that frog.
yeah,
farm.
I love that. I go every time he does it. It's wonderful. And it's going to be done here. And then Museum Weekend comes up on the 18th and 19th of June. So we've got events planned, but nothing.
Isn't that Father's Day? You're gonna
It's
encroach on
always Father's
You
Day.
encroach on Father's Day?
Yes.
You women.
Yeah, fathers stay home and drink beer. The women go to the museums.
Views expressed are those of Julie Dowd. They're not necessarily.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, so if people are interested in the Clinton County Historical Association, do you have a Facebook page?
We have a Facebook page for the Clinton County Historical Association, and we have one for the Civil War soldiers. We also have
Two
one.
separate ones.
Yeah, we also have another one for the Bluff Point Lighthouse
Wow.
with the news for the Bluff Point Lighthouse.
So you don't keep up all 3 of those, I hope.
Just 2.
Just 2 out of 3?
Yeah, Pat Parker does the other one. Yeah.
Which one is the other one?
The other one is the Lighthouse one. Yeah.
Did Roger Harwood talk her into
Yeah.
that?
Well, yes. I said I'm not going to do this, so that was that. Yeah.
Okay. So that keeps you busy and you know.
Keeps me out of trouble between
on the computer.
doing my Facebook stuff and my garden. I'm happy.
Okay.
Well, grandchildren, throw those in there too.
Yeah, those are important.
Yeah, yeah,
Hope they're at the top of the list.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, anything else, Julie, that we should know before this event gets going here? It's sold out, by the way, so it's, you know.
Oh, yeah,
good
it
thing I got
is.
here
It's a large crowd. Don't pan around. No, this
Okay.
is the second time I've done it, and people have really appreciated it, and it's going to be online afterwards, so there you
Okay,
are.
we're
All
on
the
your computer?
information, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so, the Historical Association's always looking for members and all
Yes,
that
we're
good
always
stuff?
looking for members. In fact, we've had an increase lately, I
Okay.
think because of COVID. We are always looking for volunteers, and we have quite a few volunteers, and all of our board members do specific jobs. So we had Jerry Gagne there the other day with the Cub Scouts, cleaning the outside of the museum and raking up the leaves and stuff like that. So that was great. Yeah.
Well, he's a potato farmer, so he knows
Yeah,
how
he
to
knows
make this.
exactly how to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
And so who's the president right now?
The president is Jerry Favreau. She's out of town with her daughter in Pennsylvania.
I see her posts there. She's having a
Oh,
good
she does.
time.
Oh, yeah.
So that always
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. And she's having an event with her daughter this summer, which is how to make those smorgasbords. I don't know what you call them. They've got meat and nuts and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Little
so
long
yes,
skewer there,
yeah,
yeah.
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 So that'll be exciting for her to do.
Oh, anything with food, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'll be right there. I know I'm gonna go. Yeah.
And the museum director is?
Helen Nurska.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She brought over that card that we have
She
right here.
did, yes, at our beck and call. She does a lot of the grant writing and things like that, a lot of publicity. She does all of the press releases and make sure that the museum is running well. Yeah, nice and clean. I got volunteers, got employees.
Well, it couldn't have been too hard to clean in the last 2 years because nobody,
Oh,
nobody
well,
was allowed in.
We had a person come in the other day. The dust had settled, and now it looks sparkling. So there you are. Yeah.
All right, Julie. Anything else I should ask?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
2+ years. So that's Wednesday to Saturdays, the museum will be open. If you can get an event card in the mail, or pick one up here, you can get one on your way out. We're very thankful to the House of Prairie for hosting our presentations this season. There is a donation box out by the door. If you'd like to give anything to them, all the donations are going to go to the House of Prayer over here. Thank you to Julie Dowd and Jacob Woodward for being our experts on Civil War tonight. And before they come up and start their presentation, Karen Thone is going to cover the safety contact and escape routes.
I think we came in of one or the two exits. There's one off to the side here, and there's also one here if you need to get out of emergency. There are 2 bathrooms in the front, and there's also 2 bathrooms down this hallway. And I think that should cover all of that, unless you have any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Where's Julie?
This is the second time I've done this presentation, and I've updated it a little bit as I find more stuff. But I've been doing this since 2015, when we did it as part of the sesquicentennial project for the Civil War, and we set up a committee, and our committee decided that we weren't going to get too far into the weeds about tactics or politics or anything like that. It was going to be stories about the Civil War soldiers, and we've been putting one a day online since 2015. And we're not even halfway through the 5,000 soldiers that enlisted in Clinton County. So I have to live at least 5 more years, and then there's still some leftovers after that. So I'm going to be over 80 years old when I get this all finished. Hopefully I get this finished. Jerry Favreau insisted that we put the gravestones in, or the grave markers in the book. And she did all the research on that. There's over 1,100 Civil War soldiers buried in Clinton County that we found so far. Helen Nurska did all of the work for the grants and running around and publishing and all that kind of stuff. I did a lot of the editing on the book, and I also researched. Melissa Peck was the director at the time, and she organized a bunch of pictures and stuff for us. Vicki Evans, I don't know if you know Vicki Evans, she's from Moores, I think. Talk about expert on the Civil War. She knows everything. She's also a reenactor, been to all the battlefields. She and her husband and kids did that for years and years and years on it. Bob St. John started the research, and he was the Legion commander up in Rouse's Point. And he got the money for us, or for Matt and John, to do their project, their Eagle Scout project on putting stickers on the Civil War graves. And last but not least is Major G. Gordon William Glidden. I don't know if you know him. He was on the board of the New York State Military Museum. And when he died, we went down to Saratoga. They had the reception in the New York State Military Museum. And then we went to the cemetery, the National Cemetery there. And when we came back, the final thing they did was take some of his ashes and go into the front area of the museum where the Sherman tank is, and they put some of his ashes in the Sherman tank. I remember that. And we all had a good clap, and now we know that Bill is happy in heaven. So, there were 260 New York State regiments. We had men in 118 of them, which is pretty good, I think. Most served on the eastern seaboard, which went from here, Pennsylvania, down around here up the Mississippi. They stayed mostly on the outside states. This plan, of course, is the Anaconda Plan, put up by General Winfield Scott, who was born in 1786, for Pete's sakes, and he was still in the Army in 1861. As soon as he presented that plan to Lincoln, he kind of, maybe he was asked to retire, but he retired in 1861. So we have sharpshooter regiments. We only had a couple of people in the sharpshooter regiment. We had 3 engineer regiments, the 1st, the 15th, and the 50th. From New York State, we only had people in 2 of those, the 1st and the 15th. 34 cavalry regiments, we had people in 24 of them. Cavalry regiments had more engagements than anybody else. They weren't as big, but they were little skirmishes here and there, and so they wrote each one of them down. And the main casualty that cavalry regiments had was they got captured. So if you look at a cavalry regiment's roster, captured, 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 captured. A lot of them got killed, but most of them got captured. And then there are 193 infantry regiments, and we were in 67 of those. New York State had 450,000, you can read this yourself, 5,000 plus, 550,000 plus died, 60,000 French Canadians, they think, fought in the Civil War. Either they came down or they were children of immigrants who fought for their new country. In Clinton County, 8% of the men deserted. A lot of times they were very young and they decided they didn't want to go, or they got to Washington and they found out they were going to go to Louisiana, they didn't want to go, or they got the money near the end of the war and ran, and sometimes they deserted one regiment and took up with another regiment. If they deserted, they didn't get a pension, but if they signed up for another regiment, they could write to the adjutant general, and he usually approved a pension. In Clinton County, this is an amazing thing to me. 1,100, about a fifth of these men were killed in action or died of disease. From Clinton County alone. That is amazing to me. Oh heartbreaking. This is Washington, of course. This is how our soldiers saw Washington when they got there. The Capitol dome was only half finished, right here. All of our men went into Union Station. They, sometimes they took a while to get down because they did duty on the way down, but they came into Union Station. Sometimes they immediately went from Union Station to the docks and got on the ships to go down the coast and get off at Fortress Monroe or down to the York River or the James River.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How did the soldiers get from Clinton County down to Albany to be much by rail?
Yeah, all different ways. The 118th Regiment got on steamboats and sailed up the lake, and then they got to the end of the lake, and they were given railroad cars. The officers got passenger cars. Some of them got flat cars, and some of them got cattle cars. Some of them got box cars, which they didn't like because they couldn't see outside, so what happened was they kicked the wooden slats out of the, and the Army had to pay for the repairs on the box cars. Others went up to Moores and across northern New York, up to Ogdensburg, and then down from there. Some of them went to Syracuse and then down from there. Most of it was by rail. So anyway, here we have Alexandria. We had a regiment stationed there to be provost guards, and they patrolled the whole area here. Arlington here. We've got a lot of people buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Over here we have one of the worst places for disease. This is where a lot of the 118th soldiers died because it was so germ-laden. They had typhus and diarrhea and you name it, they got it. And this is all within like a few months of them joining the 118th. That's 40th and Allen, by the way, that's where they were. And then, this was what the bridge that they guarded. This was called the Chain Bridge. This is Georgetown here. This is the White House. This is the Washington Monument, which was only half finished when they got there. Smithsonian Institution started in 1837, so you wouldn't think that soldiers would go to the Smithsonian Institution. Maybe they didn't have time off to go, but and then this was so marshy down here that this was probably like a canal where the reflecting pool is right and the mall is right now. They filled it all in. White House, anybody know what this is? It's on H Street. That's Marie Surratt's boarding house where the people conspired to kill the president. And the 16th New York Cavalry volunteers chased John Wilkes Booth over into Virginia. And we have a lot of those men buried in Clinton County today.
Oh.
This is just a few pictures of some of the local men. Anything with a star on it means the poor things got killed. This one here always gets to be a real baby, an officer, but look at his little baby face here. This one here, this guy here is from Shazy. His name is George Vaughn. I thought, oh God, what a nice looking man. He came home. This guy here, for years I thought on this picture, you can see that him sitting right here in this picture. I thought it was Stephen Moffat, but it isn't. Somebody wrote on Facebook that his name was Henry Fifield, and it was their ancestor. So I'm gonna take their word for it. Anything with blue, a blue star means they died. Here's two brothers, one lived, one died. And that was very common in those days. Two went to war, one died. How they could carry on, I don't know. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is go through this, the towns, little by little. I'll give you a taste of what's up there. And then I've put up the population of the town then and now. I don't know if you can see it, but in 1860 it was, let's see, 1,665, and now it's 2,800, so the town has grown. But there's another deserter. He tried, but he didn't want to go to Louisiana, so that's when he decided to come home by himself. This guy here was in the 14th Artillery, and when they got down to Washington, they split up the artillery regiments. So some went here, some went there, some went to the coast, some went to Petersburg or Richmond. It all depended on where they wanted separate batteries. And you'll see that not all of them are buried in Clinton County. This guy here is in Bloomingdale. There were quite a few that came down from Bloomingdale, and they enlisted in Keysville. They didn't, I guess the recruiters didn't go up that far. So if you're interested in doing research online in the comfort of your own home, and you don't have to go anywhere, this is the site that I go to first in the morning to find the soldier. And it has all of the regiments on there. You just click on whatever you want and on you go. I keep several tabs open so I can use, for instance, this one I use for just general stuff, this stuff. This one here I use for cemetery records. This one here I use for ancestry, so things don't get messed up. Sometimes it takes a long time to find a soldier, especially when they have a strange spelling of their name, and strange spellings usually run with the French Canadian names that people just didn't understand how to write them down. Although there are other exceptions. This one at the bottom here, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this saves an awful lot of time. If you're trying to search a page on the computer and you don't have time to read everything, just press Control F and a little search box will come up, and then you type in whatever you want to find and off you go. And it goes right to the word that you want to find. And you never have to scroll down and scroll down and scroll down. So keep as many tabs open as you feel comfortable with, and use your Control F function. This thing here is very interesting. If you go into the New York State Military site, it's got charts and statistics and all kinds of other things. So you know, if you're a Civil War buff at all, you're going to enjoy this part. This is also from the New York State Military Museum. This is one regiment. The top will give you the history of the regiment, what they did. Then when you click over here, battles and casualties, what you'll find is Frederick Pfister's tables of of casualties in the Civil War. So it gives you all of the engagements they were in. This happens to be the 16th. This is your 16th regiment here, and look at that. 2 weeks before they were supposed to come home, massive amount of casualties for the 16th. Gaines Mill was also a massive amount of casualties right here. I think they had 232 casualties in one battle. Today that would not be acceptable. And at the bottom of the page, this is also a very interesting part of the page. It gives you a lot of different sources that you can go to. A lot of them are online in Google Books, and I'll explain that later. Town of Sable, 1,277, and now there's 3,000 something. This poor man here, Nelson Surprise, he was captured, taken south, and then when they did the prisoner exchange, they decided he was too weak to take. They figured he would die on the way, and they left him there. So his, when his friends came back, they told the relatives that, we saw him right up until whatever date it was, and the surgeon said, he's not coming, and they just left him there to die. This one here, the regiment was in Louisiana, and they either got injured or they got sick, and then on the 24th of December, the ship went down off Savannah, Georgia, with all of the sick and wounded soldiers on it. A lot of civilians also died.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What does it mean on the left there that Nelson was found between Michael Sullivan and Albert Stafford? Is that the grave?
Yes.
And where would that grave be?
That grave would probably be, I don't know, I'd have to look it up on the Facebook site. But if he's down south, it might be in Louisiana. This one here, oh, I gave you the wrong story right here. The one off Fortress Monroe. Fortress Monroe is at the mouth of the James River. Has anybody been there? Anyway, a lot of our men went down there from Washington, and then they dispersed from Fortress Monroe to go up the peninsula to Richmond. And so on the way back, if they were sick or they just couldn't travel anymore, they left them at Fortress Monroe in the hospital. And there's a national cemetery there, Hampton National Cemetery, and that's where a lot of our soldiers are buried. This is a muster roll. We have several muster rolls at the Historical Association, and they're big, like this, huge. And the officers must have had an awful time keeping track of their paperwork because, in your saddlebags and traveling and so on, imagine folding up all of these big sheets of paper. There are also smaller ones online that you can see. And these muster rolls are in the New York State Military Museum site, but they're only the first muster roll for each regiment. So after that, you won't find the same amount of people. And a lot of times they put remarks over here like too sick to travel or deserted before we got to Washington, things like that. And these rosters are also on the Civil War site, the Military Museum. Every single person most every single person that was in the regiment, that were in the regiments, are supposedly on these muster rolls, rosters, Adjutant General's rosters. And sometimes they're there, and sometimes they are not. You have to search for them. A lot of times men put only the first regiment that they were in, and they didn't say, oh, well, I went to the 121st after I was in the 16th, so you don't find them. You have to do a lot of searching around for that. These are muster roll abstracts, little pieces of paper, and what they do is condense everything that the serviceman has done in their years of service. They usually have one for each regiment that they were in. I like this one here. His parents were Mitchell Thibault de Grandbois and Jane Shambo. Look how he changed his name. Joseph Bigwood Grandbois. Beekman Town. They started out with 2,000 something people, almost 3,000, and now they're up to 5,500. This guy here escaped 3 times. Whoops. The last time he escaped, they set dogs after him, and they caught him. But he did come home. Another thing to look for if you're interested in doing research is the 1890 schedules, and they tell you what the soldier was suffering from in 1890 if he was still alive. Anybody know what the most common ailment was? Piles. So the poor things, they went through the war, got home, then started suffering from piles and rheumatism and heart trouble and, just general old men disease, I do suppose. This is a good site to go to if you want ancestry, but you don't want to pay for it. So, New York State Archives has a site. This is the site right here at the bottom. That will allow you to sign up for ancestry, but only for things that have to do with New York State. So you won't be getting, the death index from Louisiana, but you will get the death index from New York State. They've got 49 databases that you can look at. This is a really interesting one. Clinton Prison Admission Ledgers. Oh, there's so much info. Here's the genealogist coming out of me. There's so much information on those pages. Could they read? Could they not read? Who their parents were? Were they good in school? Things like that. And it's just so an interesting read.
Could you go back to what's starting with
I'm sorry.
the ancestry site?
Yeah?
I can't. Is this still there? Okay.
Oh, I'm going to put this online, Robin,
Okay.
and so you can have it.
Okay.
But I like the almshouses. They have the Beekman Town Poorhouse on there. Oh, that's a heartbreaker just reading those. Oh, terrible. Anyway, another thing that you might be interested in, and this gives you an awful lot of information, are the town clerk's records of 1865. So they came home. The government said you got to report to the town clerk and tell them where you are now, what your post office is, and what you did in the war. And this is, a sample of what this person did in the war. If the person had died, the nearest relative was to report what happened to the person. A lot of them got a lot of bounty money. Whoops, excuse me. Bounty money. This is where they showed the bounty money here. Somebody called the museum one day and said, "Why is there a bounty on my Civil War ancestors?" I had to explain that there wasn't a bounty on the Civil War ancestors. He got a bounty for enlisting in the regiment. And the highest one I've seen is $1,200. That would buy a decent farm or whatever you wanted in those days. But usually they were like $200, $300. Sometimes they got one from the town. This is the town bounty, and this is the county bounty. Mother and father, if you're interested in genealogy at all, they give the mother and father's name. They don't give the wife's name. If the guy was married, they don't put the wife's name on there, but they do put the mother and father's name. And this is the, this is the information that, you know, I was in the Battle of Bull Run, I went to Fortress Monroe, I was captured by the enemy, that kind of stuff right here. Black Brook, this one here is kind of disappointing here. 3,000 something, and now it's down to 1,471. But they, a lot of people claim that the iron workers who joined the Civil War never went back to working in the mines, and therefore the iron industry went downhill starting with the Civil War. There's one from James Mills again. Well, all of these are online, so if you feel like you're missing something, you'll see where they are on our Facebook page. You can just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I scrolled back today to 2015, the first one that we did. County histories and historians. If you've got historians that you're friendly with, please use them. Who do we know? We've got one in the back here, Shazy historian. Yes? Yes. We've got Sharon Houston in Sable Forks, County J historian. She's wonderful. Joan Hobbs in Ellenburg is great. Gary Vancorn, Beekman Town. You know, please use your historians. And these books are online. They're in Google Books. I like the name of this one, Military and Civil History of the County of Essex, New York. This one here is our county, in Franklin County. And a lot of times historians have letters, so feel free to ask them if they have any letters. This one's our favorite site at the museum for research. I don't know if you know about this, the Northern New York Library Network. If you're interested in anything that has to do with New York State, most of the newspapers from New York State are on this site, nnyln.org. Anybody not use this site? Yeah. And one of the major complaints is this, that, see this little link underneath? That's the one that you have to keep if you're going to do research. You don't use the URL at the top of the page because they change those buckets frequently. So you got to use the one that's attached to the page. That's called the persistent link. Champlain stays about the same. Recognize any names? Gilmore, Gilman, LaFountains, lots of LaFountains. This is the one that was lost at sea in December 1864. We've got, so far, I found soldiers in 32 national cemeteries. I visited some of them. I went to the Sharpsburg Cemetery in Antietam and took pictures of the stones there. My daughter just went to this one right here. This is Julius Wells, one of her ancestors, not related to me. She was on a business trip in Louisiana, and the National Cemetery, the Chalmette National Cemetery, is right next to the land that they fought the Battle of New Orleans on. It's just a little bit east of New Orleans. And so she said, blah, 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 did you know that the Battle of New Orleans was after the War of 1812? They didn't want to hear anything that had to do with that. All they wanted to do was say, this is where the Battle of New Orleans was held, or not held, fought, and they didn't want any more than they're telling them what to do. But anyway, she did find them. All of the graves are numbered, and so it's a long, skinny cemetery. It's probably only I don't know, a few 100 feet wide, and goes from the river right up to the road. These little stickers here are what Matt and John put on the graves in Clinton County, so if you're ever exploring. Civil War Pension Index does tell you a bunch of stuff. So if you're doing any research, just write Civil War pension, and up will pop up this pension index, and then you just type in the name of the person and the regiment. That usually brings it up. This one here was George Tankard from Saranac, or Redford, I should say. He was with the 91st New York Infantry, and because he was black, they took him out and put him in a colored regiment. They didn't let him stay with the original regiment where all his friends were. This guy here, Francois d'Avignon, has an interesting story. He's a surgeon from the 96th Infantry. Yes?
What infantry was George Tankard in? George Tankard, which infantry?
91st New York Infantry. Francois d'Avignon, whose family, some of whom live in Sable Forts, was a surgeon, a doctor in Canada, and he was in the 1837 rebellion up there, and the British caught him and they put him in jail. He escaped just before he was due to be hanged. So he went into jail, he escaped again, just before they were going to hang him again, and third time lucky, he came to the United States. And he told his family that as soon as we cross the border, we're not speaking French anymore, we're going to be speaking English, and that was the end of that. So Francois d'Avignon actually got captured, and he went to Libby prison, and they told him, don't be treating any of the prisoners in the prison. And he said, more or less, I'm doing business, I'll do what I want. So he was kind of the hero of the day there. He did come back and he practiced as a surgeon for several years after the war. This is Frank Palmer. We had Frank Palmer's frock coat at the museum. It kind of walked one day. That was the end of that. But he did serve after the Civil War also, in many capacities in Clinton County. After the Civil War, many of the local wounded veterans were given jobs by the government, such as Bluff Point Lighthouse. Herworth, George Herworth, German immigrant, got injured, and they gave him a job at the Bluff Point Lighthouse. And at Fort Montgomery, they also put wounded Civil War soldiers up there to guard the premises. Chazy, wow, look at how much Chazy has grown. Oh, really, not that much. I thought that was one. First man killed in Chazy was Albert Ransom, and he was at Harper's Ferry. And if you ever go to Harper's Ferry, take a walk from the top of that hill down through the cemetery. It is the prettiest walk along the river, where the Shenandoah and the Potomac meet. A lot of men were in their 40s when they enlisted, and they really couldn't hack it. Some men lied because they wanted the money, especially towards the end of the war, and they made sure that they got their 90 days. You have to be in the service for 90 days before you got your pension. And then they either faked injury or went into the hospital malingering or whatever, and went home. But the older men did not fare well in the Civil War. The oldest one we had in Clinton County was in his 60s. And it says on his muster roll abstract, he was half Indian. And what he was a mountain man out west. And his mother had been a Native American, and his father had been a French-Canadian trapper, which is kind of interesting. And then he had a son out there, and his son was also listed as half Indian. And those are the only two Native Americans that we have from Clinton County.
What are their names?
I could give them to you, but I just,
Okay.
yeah. Fold 3, if you go on Fold 3, this is a military site. All the wars that the United States ever fought in, and others, and other countries. I find it very confusing. They improved it. It takes me hours to find anything in there now. However, if you have Ancestry, it's folded into your Ancestry account. Grand Army of the Republic, we had a lot of Grand Army of Republic posts in Clinton County, excuse me. And what people did was they kept the books, the descriptive books. And so we don't have them all, which is a shame, really. And if you find somebody who has some of those descriptive books, kind of persuade them to get them copied. And we'd like copies of them at the museum. But it also, in the person's own words, tells you what his name was, where he was born, what he did for a living, you know, when he joined, where he joined. And then at the end, a lot of times it tells you what happened to him. Poor things usually died.
Why were the bounties of different amounts to different people?
I don't know. It all depends on what the town had available at the time and what the government gave them. Sometimes, for instance, in Cherubusco, they had quite large bounties because they wanted men to come there from other places to enlist in Cherubusco because the government says, okay, town of Clinton, you must have this many men. You know, Shazy, you must have this many men. And Cherubusco, you know how few people there are there. They asked people to come and they offered large bounties so that the people would come to their town to enlist so that they wouldn't get fined by the government for not having enough men to send to war. But also in different times of the war, there was, if they needed more men more quickly, they gave larger bounties to go into the service. Do you have an ancestor that got a bounty?
He probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1863 is when the bounties came in. After that, after the 2 years were over for most regiments, for the earlier regiments, people really had found out what war was like and they didn't really want to go anymore. So the incentive was to give them bounties. And a lot of farms were bought in Clinton County with a bounty money. Two sites that will help you out here, American Battlefield Trust and Wikipedia. The American Battlefield Trust people have come up here to scope out the Battle of Plattsburgh and also Battle of Valcour Island. Find a Grave, this is wonderful for finding information on folks, it's free. And who would believe that there's 199 cemeteries in Clinton County, for Pete's sakes? This woman here, Joyce Ranieri, has done a wonderful job. She has actually walked these cemeteries and tried to find out as much as she can about the people in them. She built on Clyde Rabidoux's information, who built on Woody McClellan's information. So she's added a lot of the new stuff that came down the pike. My daughter, let me see, 2 days ago, she said, we were talking about going to Canada. I said, oh, you've been to Canada? Yes, she'd been to Canada. I said, what did you do in Canada? She said, I went up past Huntington, Quebec, to find out my ancestors' graves. I said, oh. So she said she had taken 400 pictures in the cemetery in Hinchenbrook, Quebec, and she's starting to put them online right now. I'm so proud of her. You know, it took me almost 50 years to get her trained, but now she's going for it. But anyway, those two sites are very, very interesting. This Clinton County Tombstone Transcription Project, just write Clinton County Tombstone Transcription Project, and up will come Clinton, Essex, Franklin, all of this, well, most of the cemeteries that are in those three counties. She's done them all. Dannemora, boy, they've grown, I guess, since the prison came, huh? From 1200 to 45. Saranac had an awful lot of men enlist in Saranac. They claim that they are the largest town by percentage of men that enlisted in the Civil War. However, what happened, and you can see it, is the men from Dannemora walked down the hill and enlisted in Saranac. So. This the battery's gone. Oh, here it is. This is on the New York State Archives. Very, very interesting. New York State Registers of Officers and Enlisted Men. And it gives you information on who they were, what regiment they were in, and at the very, very end is what happened to them. These are handy. We've got these at the museum, or they're in Google Books. And from Bull Run to Chancellorsville is the 16th Infantry. Have you seen that? And there's that Clinton, Essex County one. Honors of the Empire State. That's lovely because it's got all kinds of information about individual regiments from New York State. 3 years with the Adirondack Regiment is 118th New York. Ellenberg. This guy here, he died, but we've got his letters at the museum. Francis Prairie. And he mentioned that Andrew Chisholm, who could not swim, went into the river when everybody was taking a bath or bathing, and he sank right to the bottom. And that was the end of that. There's a real Ellenberg name, Magoon. These are online in Google Books. All kinds of information. Just write in New York State Assembly 1861 or whatever year you want, and it will give you all kinds of information. It will. In there is that Herworth appointment to the White House. Town of Plattsburgh, Jerry Bates and Melissa Facto went through all the adjutant general's lists and took out all the men who enlisted in Plattsburgh, the town of Plattsburgh. We didn't have the city of
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did the newspapers at that time write stories or obituaries on local people?
No, you'd think that, you know, if somebody had somebody die in Battle of Gettysburg, they would have written in there. I can't find anything like that.
Usually a lot of the larger newspapers would report on after a battle, they would have like the list of
Yeah.
casualties from the community. But there were so many of them that they wouldn't just write ones for individual, it'd just be long lists of soldiers killed.
Yeah. We had one soldier, Steveson, who was on the Battle of Antietam, and he is actually buried on the field there. His father went down and found him. 4 days later, he found him lying there, and he actually erected a monument right on the battlefield, which is amazing to me. Somebody from Clinton County. New York Death Index. When all else fails, use that. There's so many different death indexes, so you'll have to go in and out of them. National Home for Disabled Soldiers. A lot of juicy information in there too, if you ever get to one. One that was in the International Home. It'll tell you um, when they went in, why they went in, and who their relatives are, what they sold their last effects for, you know, $4.42 for so-and-so's jacket and trousers. Awful. A lot of them committed suicide while they were still in the homes, which is too bad. But you'll see the national homes all over the country. There's a lot of them in California and the national homes out there. This lady here actually went to Florida, saw her relative's grave, and it was all broken up, or gravestone, I should say, was all broken up. So she ordered one from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and when she got it, did it come to us at the museum? I think it did come to us at the museum. Anyway, when she took it down there, they gave him, the Legion gave him another ceremony, which I thought was very nice of them to do. However, this guy here's ancestor was a Blackman, Isaac Blackman, whose descendant was the author of Roe versus Wade in 1973. And they were fighting it all over again. You can get at any time through the Department of Veterans Affairs either another stone because the first one's destroyed, or a new one that hasn't been in there, been issued before, or you can get a bronze plaque. So we just had one put in, or I didn't have one, but a lady had one put in Ellenburg, which I thought was rather nice, a nice big bronze plaque.
Do they pay for the plaque? Or is it
Yeah, it's free. No, it's not free,
Yeah.
but, you know, they don't charge you for it. No. I gotta put a plug in here too. I put notes on there to myself. Coming up is Memorial Day weekend. Please, 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 don't use anything abrasive on these old Civil War headstones. A lot of them weren't put in at the time of the Civil War. They were put in the 1890s and 1880s. But please use D2 or some other biological cleaner. The best one we have found is D2. That's what they use at Arlington National Cemetery. The ones that you get at Lowe's up here, I don't know what they're called, but they're called biological. But they're not as strong and they don't last as long as D2. And I have actually seen this happen. The ones that we did at the DAR Cemetery in West Plattsburgh, every year the DAR holds a workshop on how to clean gravestones, always using D2. Still nice white stones. At another cemetery I've been working at, they use a lesser kind of biological cleaner, and the stuff is coming back. You know, Egyptian moss, that black stuff, that, well, like that. Fungal, lichen, it's coming back next year, this year, after it was done last year. So D2, people say it's too expensive. It's $55 a gallon. You dilute it 50%, you get about 20, 30 stones out of it, maybe even more. A lot of elbow grease, but I think it's worth it when the stones are there and they're nice and white. Oh, beautiful.
I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but a stone cutter told me that after the stone is cleaned, to daub it with a cloth with white kerosene, and it soaks into the rock and the lichen won't grow, but I don't know if it's bad for the stone or not. I have not.
I'd have to ask my gravestone consultant here. The woman that does our gravestone classes, not mine, I'm not in the DAR, but she gives the classes for the DAR. She's taken all kinds of classes on how to restore them and clean them, and I've never heard that, so I will ask her. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
I don't know if it, I don't know, that's what he told me, he cuts stones.
Yeah. Well, some people say, you know, put Clorox on them too. Then there's a chemical reaction. It's like putting it on baking soda. You can bubble, bubble, bubble,
Or
bubble.
not to use stone.
Oh. Yeah. So anyway, here's some in some national cemeteries, and you'll see that there are all different kinds of them, even though they're all military gravestones. A lot of them come from Massachusetts, the Gross brothers in Massachusetts. Lost an arm. Sometimes these people were in 2 and 3 regiments. The record is 4 for Clinton County that I found so far. Look at the size of pool now. From 1,000 something to 6,000 something. That's an amazing growth. That's the Chain Bridge. The Chain Bridge is right up here by Georgetown. And we had the 118th over here guarding that end of the bridge, and we had people over here guarding that end of the bridge. And they would take up the boards from the walkway on the bridge so that if the enemy did overrun them, they couldn't get across the bridge. The District of Columbia was a big square, and then they decided that maybe they could only deal with this part as the District of Columbia, and the city of Washington is right in there. But this is where 40th and Allen was for the 118th, where a lot of them died. And Union Station here, and a lot of them camped either here in the northeast or up in here in the northwest. And this is where Lincoln was standing when he was looking over the defenses of Washington, and they told him, you better duck, they can see you with your big tall hat on, which he did. These are just some of the battles that the people were in and some of the people that were in. This is where the 118th stopped on the way down. Greeley House in Maryland to guard the railroads. The 7 days battles, killers. Gaines Mill was in there. Camp Parole was in Annapolis. That's where most of the people went to be exchange for prisoner exchange. Plattsburgh. This guy here survived the war, and in later life he got killed by a train. Many of our cavalry people went to the Shenandoah Valley to fight, and they fought under not only Sheridan, but they also fought under General Custer, which I thought was kind of interesting. And now we're going to have our history savant give us a few words about his ancestor, Peter DeBray. This is Jacob Woodward, and his father and mother sitting up here. And uncle. There you go.
So Peter DeBray served in the 91st New York with his 2 brothers, William and Charles. William was around age 30, around my age, and his younger brother Charles was around 18. Both of them, all 3 of them served in the same regiment. As to why they joined, I can't really tell you. Probably a lot of young men were bored sitting at home, and you have this big exciting war going on, so let's just join the service and have an adventure. Peter was the only one of them that received a wound. This is actually a photograph that I found in the Yale medical records. And the reason this photograph was taken is that after the war, they were trying to understand how battlefield wounds affect the human body, because they didn't really understand internal medicine. None of the sort of medical knowledge that we have now, they had back then. So what ended up happening was, in the last week of the war, on April 1st, you have the Union Army captures the South Side Railroad at Five Forks, Virginia, which is the last major supply line for the Confederate Army defending Richmond. And on April 2nd, Grant orders an all-out assault on Petersburg all along the line. The Confederate Army at this time was completely exhausted. They had no food, no ammunition. Their soldiers were getting letters from home from their wives saying, our children are starving, there's no food, we're hungry, we're cold. soldiers were leaving in droves, just going home, just dropping the rifles and going home. They knew the war was over. So the only guys that remained in the trenches were either veterans who decided to stick it out, or the Confederates had also been recruiting large numbers of civilians, usually 14-year-old boys and older men, because it's all that they had left to fight with. So on April 2nd, the 91st New York participates in the breakthrough at Petersburg, Virginia. My great-grandfather was wounded and shot in the side. Obviously, it's a fairly severe wound. The bullet enters his ribs here and exits out. He's able to remove himself from the field. He gets back to a hospital where he's treated, and then he's sent to Washington, where they have much larger, more organized hospitals for wounded soldiers, and that's where he's treated, and that's where this photograph is taken. This is actually taken the day Lincoln received a bullet in the back of the head by John Wilkes Booth. His family was up from Redford. That's where a lot of the Dubrays, Redford and Chazy Lake, was where my family lived. This is his enlistment record. This is the record of the 91st New York, and these are the battles. Where's the laser? This is the battle that he was wounded in. And as you can see, the 91st New York was also at Appomattox when the war ended. Later, after Peter got home, he became a farmer. He became rather prosperous, had a large family. Here's just some of the pension records. Unfortunately, I know of a gentleman who has Peter's discharge papers. I have not been able to get access to them because he's an older gentleman. I don't think he's on social media too much. As you can see, Peter got rather big later in life. He was about 400 pounds when he died. Today, people being a little bit plus size is rather common, but back then that was considered highly unusual. And the reason that he got so big is that unlike today, where you have the Veterans Administration who takes care of vets' needs, there was nothing like that for Civil War soldiers. You got into the service, you were wounded, they took care of you, but after you were discharged, that was it. There was nothing. So a lot of veterans either took up drinking to cope with the pain. Peter basically ate himself to death. And that's why he got so big. When he passed away in the early 1900s, they actually had to break the door frame to the family home to get his body out of the house. And this is a poem about Peter when he was a little bit younger and the kind of man he was. He was a bit of a rough and tumble character, kind of had a penchant for drinking and fighting. He was quite the character. And this is his wife, my great-great-grandmother. Another picture of Peter, and that's his family headstone up in Redford today, and this huge cemetery up on the hill there. And of course you have various newspapers about his service. He was kind of a well-known guy up in that area until he passed away. So yeah, that's my great-great-grandfather.
Good job, buddy.
I don't know if Julie has anything.
I was just gonna ask, but how many children did he have, 12 or 13?
Quite a few.
Yeah, so you must have a lot of
Very big
relatives
family.
in Clinton County.
Yes, we do.
Yes,
Yes, they do.
yes.
They're not, did they, do you have any history about, did he take his kidney out or?
No, I'm not really sure what because again, back then, they didn't have a lot of understanding of internal medicine, so I'm not really sure what organs the bullet perforated, but obviously it did cause him enough pain that he gained significant weight, and because there wasn't a Veterans Administration, he had to deal with it on his own.
It never healed either.
And it never did. And that wasn't uncommon for Civil War soldiers. As they got older, they started dying from their wounds. In fact, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, the hero of Little Round Top, part of the reason why he died is that the wound that he received at Petersburg, he got shot basically right through the groin. It never healed. It was always festering, always a constant problem for him. tough people. Very tough people.
Does being tall and big, run in your family?
Yeah, kind of does. My
Your
uncle's
mother-
back there.
No,
Uncle Mark, stand
you're
up.
on the shorter side, yeah.
All my sons are taller than I am.
Is that right?
Yeah, all three of them.
Yeah,
They're all over 6 foot.
yeah. Well, that's the debris coming out of them, I guess, huh?
I guess,
Yeah. I'm
because
thinking,
I'm the tallest in my family.
are you? I was
almost
just
6
thinking
foot tall.
Frank and, yeah, he's not that tall.
No.
No. Anyway, thank you. That was good. We enjoyed that. Soldiers and Sailors database from the National Park Service. In an emergency, use it. Family search, it's part of ancestry now, so that's good for you to use. 56 hospitals around Washington, in houses, in hospitals, in armories, in Smithsonian buildings, for Pete's sakes, yeah. But they were all different. This one here I thought was beautiful. It was in a beautiful hotel down in Louisiana someplace. Saranac, here we have. It's kind of doubled, I think, in size. And in the census records, L's and S's look alike. So when you see such and so was an S or L-A-W-Y-E-R, people think that their ancestor was a highly educated lawyer, when really he was a sawyer working in the woods. National Archives, pictures. Library of Congress, a lot of pictures. I think that's one of the reasons why I like the Civil War so much, is because of the pictures. Schuyler Falls. And you've noticed probably all the way through, so many French-Canadian names. So many. Probably more than 40% of the people who enlisted in Clinton County had French-Canadian names. And these are just extra databases that I put on for you to look at by yourself. And this is the end of the talk right here. And this is the website that the PowerPoint presentation is on. And I will also add it to the Facebook page tomorrow, so you can be able to go right to it. Any questions? If you haven't come up to see these artifacts yet, please do. They're very interesting.
Good job, Joey.
Did you have a question?
No, I just said good job.
Oh, thanks.
Very good.
Thank you.